Jeep's been making this rattling, ticking sound coming from underneath the area where the clutch is, and I've narrowed it down to believing that it's the throwout bearing. The sound is only present when I let the clutch out. When I push the clutch in just a little bit, I can hear it fading away. In this video, I'm going to be removing the transmission, sliding it back so I can gain access to the clutch area, and I'm going to be replacing the throwout bearing. And while I'm in there, I'm also going to replace the clutch. And I also ordered a flywheel in case I need to replace the flywheel as well. Here's what I received so far. I'm still waiting on a couple of pieces. I ordered everything online from Amazon. Now this is the flywheel. I figured while I was going to be in there, might as well replace it. Over here, this is the Luck clutch kit, the housing, flywheel side, comes with the alignment tool. This is a throwout bearing that comes with the clutch kit, and it feels kind of light. You can see that there's lots of plastic. You can tell that this part will be easily worn, and that's what I read. People were having a lot of issues with these failing shortly after they were installed. You know, this plastic in here fails. I've also heard about these springs breaking off. So I ordered this replacement, which is all metal. I'm also going to be replacing the pivot ball for the clutch fork. First thing I always do, chock my wheels. Parking brakes on, and I'm not going to be jacking the car up. I just do this for additional safety precautions. I have jack stands set up in two positions. One here on the back of the transfer case, and another in front of the skid plate supporting the transmission. So when we drop this skid plate, the transfer case and the transmission are going to want to drop as well, because the skid plate is supporting all of that weight. I'm starting with the torque stud first, and this is a 14 millimeter. You also have to get the wrench or a socket on the top here, also a 14 millimeter, because that'll just spin. Torque stud's off. Make sure that you don't lose your washers for the torque stud. There's a series of washers that go on there, and remember what order you've taken them off. I have two on the bottom, and I believe there's one on top. Now I'm going to remove these two nuts from the transmission mount. This is a 15 millimeter socket. Now we're good to remove the skid plate bolts here, here, and here, and the three on the other side. I'm going to put a clamp on here to support the weight a little bit, just to make it a little bit easier to take it down. Depending on what kind of transfer case drop you have, or if you don't have a transfer case drop, your bolt heads might be a little bit different. Mine are a 5/16 hex wrench or Allen key. And if your Jeep has a lot of rust in this area, you have to be very careful removing these bolts, because the nuts that are welded inside of the frame, I've seen them break loose, and then the job becomes a lot more difficult. Trying to bring these out evenly, going a little bit at a time. All right, so these bolts are loose, but they're not all the way out. Now I'm going to switch over to the other side and drop those down a little bit. All right, it looks like the weight of the transmission and the transfer case are now fully supported by the jack stands. You can see I have this movement here. So I'm going to finish backing out these bolts on this side. I want to support this. These clamps so it doesn't drop completely. I'm going to move over to the other side. Okay, should come down. And there we go. I'll release it from the other side. Next, we're going to be removing the front and the rear drive shafts. Let's start by removing these nuts. And then I'm going to tie off drive shaft over here to the frame rail. I'm going to start by removing these bolts that hold on the clamps for the U-joint on the drive shaft. It's an 8mm socket. It's a good idea to have any kind of tape ready. When you drop this drive shaft, you're going to want to tape up the bearing caps on the U-joint. Make sure that they don't fall out, because there's lots of needle bearings in there that you don't want to lose. I got to move the camera, get this out. All right, so the front shaft's out. I have the bearing caps taped up. And now I'm just going to hang this from the rail with a bungee. Keep it up out of the way. And I'm going to do the same for the rear drive shaft. Before I remove this drive shaft, I'm going to make a mark so I know where it aligns when I put it back in. Before I pull this shaft all the way out, I'm going to get a drip pan just in case I lose any fluid from the transfer case. Next thing you're going to want to do is disconnect your connections on the transfer case. Right here in the center, this square plug, your vacuum plug, that pulls right off. You want to disconnect your shift linkage. Also just pops right off with a screwdriver. You have a vent hose that's on the top, and then you have your plug for your speedometer over here on this side. So let's start unplugging these. That just pulls right off. This vacuum line should also pull right off. There's a breather line right here. There we go. And now we'll have to disconnect our shift linkage. There we go. Okay, so all of our connections on the transfer case are off. I'm going to remove this mounting plate next. There's 4 bolts on the bottom, I believe are 16 millimeter. All right, I pulled that bracket off the exhaust hanger right here. I thought it was going to be difficult, but it slid right off. I just had to wiggle it back and forth. The brackets are out of the way. Next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to bring over my transmission jack and I'm going to support this transmission. All right, so now I have the weight of the transmission and the transfer case supported on this transmission jack. I have the jack toward the rear of the transmission because it's also supporting the weight of the transfer case. So hopefully where I have it right now, it'll be balanced. First, before I put the strap on, I'm gonna remove the slave cylinder, and then I'm gonna go around on the other side, and I have a couple of connections that I need to unplug. And up in here, there's a sensor that needs to be removed. I want to loosen up the slave cylinder now, using a 13 millimeter. I'll put these bolts back in so I know where they go. Now I'm preparing to remove the shifter. So I remove the boot. This little plate is how you release the shifter. You push it down and then spin it and it should release. All right, so I'm gonna push down on this. Like it's on a spring, and I'm gonna turn it counterclockwise and it should release. See it turning? I'm gonna let it up and it should pop right out. And there it goes. Put a rag in there. There's 2 bolts. There's one here and then another right there, right behind it. There's one more bolt for that shifter mount for the transfer case was right here. So I removed that. I was able to pull the shifter out from up above. And next I'm going to remove this sensor. The last piece I need to remove before we can start unbolting the transmission is the starter. First I'm going to disconnect the cables from the battery, and I'm not going to totally remove the starter. What I'm going to do is unbolt it and see if I can place it on top of the frame rail right there to the left. Stay. All right, starter's out, all the connections are removed. Now we can start unbolting the transmission. Now I think that there's only 4 bolts that hold the bell housing to the engine. I'm going to start with the service plate bolts. These are 19 millimeter. I was having a real hard time with the clearance, this exhaust here. And I thought that I could do it without disconnecting the exhaust hangers from the back. They're such a pain in the ass, but I couldn't. I was having an issue with the clearance. So I just released the exhaust hangers in the back. Now I should be able to get out transmission the rest of the way. I mentioned earlier, the main reason why I was doing this job was because I was getting a rattle. I was pretty sure that it was my throwout bearing. And it looks like we were right. take a look at this. So here's a better look. It's got some wear. It's not terrible. Found my rattle. All right, I'm loosening all the nuts that hold the clutch in place. Finish backing those out and remove the clutch. All right, so here's the old clutch was removed and doesn't look too bad. Looks like it's got some meat left on it. Like I said, since I was in there, planned on doing it anyway. Coloration's not too bad. And a needle bearing just fell out of there. This bearing's shredded. Coming out in pieces. Put some heat on it. This thing is really heavy. I have to be careful taking this down. I was having a hard time getting out that pilot bearing because it's shredded. I went to O'Reilly Auto Parts. They have a loaner tool program. So I got this pilot bearing puller attachment for a slide hammer and the slide hammer. How this works is you slide it inside the pilot bearing and then you turn this. You see those jaws opening up to grip behind the pilot bearing, and then you use a slide hammer to pull it out. You can see, got the bearing out. So this thing was pretty bad. All right, pilot bearings in. Now we're gonna put on the flywheel. These bolts only line up one way. I'm just going to snug these in a star pattern. Not torquing them down yet. Just gonna go up there. Okay, you're going to torque this down in the star pattern. Okay, now we're going to install our clutch. I have my alignment tool already installed. Flywheel side is marked on the inside. go. I have a bolt ready. I'll go down on these in kind of a star pattern as well. Next, we're going to torque these bolts 40 foot-pounds. Next, I'm going to remove the pivot ball. And here we go. Got the new one. Now we're going to install the throwout bearing along with the clutch fork. Remove our clutch alignment tool. Alright, I'm going to start moving the transmission closer. My driveway's on kind of a slope downward, so I hooked up a ratchet strap just to help me pull it forward. I'll probably have to connect another strap on the other side once it gets a little bit closer. And I'm going to put another strap on this side now. Alright, ratchet straps hooked up on this side. We're close. A little high. I'm gonna have to lower it down a little bit. All right, so I'm taking a break. I just received a package. Custom-made cup holders. One for the driver's side, one for the passenger side. Comes with installation instructions. This is gonna mount right here. One for this side, one for the passenger side. These are from Dog Fox Industries. I ordered these on eBay. They're solid, not cheap plastic. Here they are again. The company is Dog Fox Industries. So we got it pretty close. I'm gonna keep moving it in until these studs are really close. And I'm going to put the service plate on. I'm going to slide these bolts through the alignment pins just to help me get it lined up. Real close. Oh, I think that's it. We're in. I'm going to slide this bolt back out. I'm going to put up the service plate. All right, service plates back up. Okay, we got it real close. Not there yet. I'm at the point where I think I can get the bolt started and start pulling it in. All right, so we're all bolted up. Everything's torqued. Now I'm going to start putting everything back together. Everything goes on in reverse how we took everything off.